2021 saw much-loved shmup franchise Cotton celebrate its 30th anniversary, and in contrast to some larger video game companies, Nintendo, the developers of Cotton Success went all out to offer fans of the candy-munching little witch a proper celebration, starting with a full remake of the original game, and then interspersing the whole year with re-releases galore. To cap it all off, they rounded things out with a brand new entry in the series in the form of Cotton Rock and Roll, or Cotton Fantasy as it will be known in the West when it eventually releases here. Now there's nowhere else to start with this one other than with unarguably the most distinctive feature of Cotton Rock and Roll, the roster. When you start the game, there are 6 characters available, many of whom you may recognise either from previous Cotton titles or from different games entirely, with an original 7th character, unlockable through play, and an 8th, Silk, who apparently just plays the same as Cotton herself, available as an Amazon Japan exclusive order bonus. What's so interesting here is that many of the characters don't just use different shots or move at different speeds, etc., but actually introduce completely game-changing mechanics. Cotton herself, apart from being the obvious star of the show, is also a kind of standard character. She has her magic shots, which can be replenished by collecting the plentiful coloured gems. She has a bomb, and her shot increases in power as you level up. Unlockable character Takut plays very similarly, but her magic attacks are much more effective and can be fired in any direction. And instead of a bomb, she can launch her trident as many times as she wishes, something that both causes damage and cancels enemy shots. Cotton's rival Aptly again plays in a relatively similar manner by making use of the magic attacks, but in her case she can catch and throw enemies a la Cotton too. Crossover character Kawase, who some might recognise from the platforming series Umihara Kawase, also makes use of the catching and throwing enemies technique, but she is able to grab enemies from further away and in any direction, making this a far more central mechanic when playing as her. Another guest character, Luffy, is from some game I've never heard of, and actually strips back all the extra mechanics to give you a pretty straight-laced shmup experience, with a thin forward shot, a chargeable laser, and a regular bomb. Finally, there are 2 characters based on ships from other shmups, namely Cyvarrior and Sanvain. Ria, the Cyvarrior character, uses that game's famous buzz mechanic that sees you level up by grazing bullets, and each time you do so being granted a brief period of invulnerability, during which time any bullet you contact with will also be added to your graze counter, allowing you, if played right, to keep hitting those invincible periods again and again in quick succession. Fine, representing Sanvain, introduces a timer mechanic which gives you a clock counting down to 0 instead of a life system. Taking hits reduces the timer, but collecting gems replenishes it. On top of this, you have 3 different weapons you can cycle through at will, each with their own special attack that you're granted an unlimited supply of. Now the pros of having all these characters are, I think, pretty obvious. The sheer variety they provide is phenomenal. While some play like regular alternate characters, others mix up the gameplay in absolutely fundamental respects. And just trying each of them out, let alone mastering them, is going to offer players a ton of playtime. However, the con of having so many characters with such varied mechanics is it's very difficult to get them all right. Some characters like Takut seem almost ridiculously OP, while others like Luffy don't initially seem to have many obvious advantages. On the other hand, I did check the top of the leaderboards not long ago and saw that the top 6 scores had all been achieved with different characters. So it seems some people are managing to get to grips with ones that I've personally been struggling with, which I consider a very positive sign as, for example, even though right now I'm happy gunning for the 1cc with Takut and barely touching most of the others, it looks like they definitely can be used more effectively, and so making the effort to learn them should be worthwhile, giving the game a potentially huge amount of replayability. With so many characters, it's also going to be difficult to create stages that are going to work equally well for everyone, and again, my experience so far is that the hit rate here is pretty variable. One undeniable positive is, once again, the sheer variety the game serves up. You always start from the same stage, but following that, 5 more open up to be approached in any order. You then play a set final 2 to reach the game's conclusion, meaning you need to beat 8 stages for a clear. On top of that, there are 2 bonus interludes per run that see the game switch perspective to play more like panorama Cotton and task you with collecting 100 teacups to earn points and an extra life. As you beat the game with each of the original 6 characters, you will open up a unique stage based on each character. Cotton, for example, opens up a reimagining of Stage 1 from the original Cotton, while Rhea and Fine open up stages that take after their own original shmups. This makes for 16 scrolling shmup stages and the 2 bonus stages, so content-wise this is absolutely awesome and also allows each run to potentially be unique as you pick and choose the stages you want to face. However, certain stages do seem a lot more suited to certain characters, with Rhea and the Cyvarrior stage being perhaps the clearest example. Rhea is, as you'd imagine, perfectly suited to the Cyvarrior stage, which by the way combines both the opening stage and the factory stage from Cyvarrior into one beautifully done homage that ought to give fans of that game a real buzz to see. And the bullet patterns allow her to constantly replenish her buzz meter and just generally have a grand old time of things. With other characters though, that stage can be a lot more difficult, and in my opinion less fun, as it seems like your loadout is just not suited to what the stage is throwing at you. Conversely, especially in earlier stages, it can seem like there just aren't enough enemy bullets flying around to make Rhea a particularly viable option, although she does seem a popular choice in the upper echelons of the leaderboards in the harder difficulties. And as mentioned, judging by the online scores, all characters do seem to be being used well by at least someone somewhere, so perhaps I just haven't learned how to utilise them properly, but it just seemed to me that certain stages were almost no-go zones with certain characters. Although, of course, while with the number of stages on offer, it is indeed perfectly possible to just not play certain stages, meaning this could even be thought of as almost a bit of strategy for those who've got to know the game better. And on the subject of stages, the visual variety is also something pretty impressive. You have space stages, spooky original Cotton style stages, sky stages, castle stages, stages that see you descend into ancient tombs, and each one, as well as all the characters and enemies, while unlikely to win any artistic or technical awards, do all have a very suitable and consistent cartoony look, despite utilising a lot of 3D effects. The downside here is that I did find there to be something of the Potemkin village about a lot of the backgrounds. I'm aware that's always true in video games, but it did feel in certain stages that the joints and beams holding up the scenery were showing through a little too obviously. The game is, of course, as you can see, always full of life and colour, but again, there is an attendant negative here in that bullet visibility, as well as the colour of the gems you're collecting, which with certain characters can be almost equally crucial, can become a real issue when things get very busy, and there are times where things really do get overly chaotic, and you're almost playing in a hit and hope kind of style while you wait for things to clear. If you do take a hit though, it is not the end of the world, because certainly on normal and even on hard, to be honest, Cotton Rock and Roll is not a particularly tough game. And even if it was, the fact that you are granted an extra life every 5 million points in runs that can easily see you hitting scores of well over 50 million means you can easily take a double-figure number of hits while still managing the 1cc. There is an even harder special difficulty option to challenge more experienced players, however, and a variety of scoring systems, meaning it would definitely be a mistake to simply write it off if you are looking for more of a challenge. In terms of audio, the pros and cons here are simple and stark. On the one hand, the music is made up of good, classic, catchy Cotton style tunes. On the other hand, the constant chattering from Cotton herself, Silk and their various little pals are an extreme annoyance. Fortunately, the voice volume level can be adjusted or even turned off, making this into a very minor issue. The story can also be turned off, and I'd imagine most people will wish to do so after having seen it once, as it's the usual inconsequential fluff and remains the same whichever character you choose. It is all in English, however, as are all the character explanations, which is pretty important here as you will probably want to have a quick read through the various abilities on offer before trying each new one out. Other options are a mixed bag. You have a stage select, which is good for practicing, and the online leaderboards are really nicely done with scores separated by difficulty and the ability to filter by character if you so wish, as well as see the routes different people chose. There are a couple of little misses though, most notably the lack of a quick restart from the pause menu, something I will never understand why any shmup wouldn't include as standard. So as you can see, lots of pros and cons, but with the cons being mainly confined to minor things, while the pros are usually the actual most important parts of a shmup experience. There is one area, however, where I can find absolutely no fault with the experience at all, and that is simply that this is Cotton. And I'll explain why that's so important. See, this may be the series' 30th anniversary, but it's been over 20 years since the last new shmup bearing the Cotton name, and despite one of the most common complaints about all the games, movies and TV shows companies these days have such an insatiable thirst to revive, being that they rarely manage to capture what it was that made the original so beloved in the first place, that is absolutely not the case here. Cotton Rock and Roll does a fantastic, some might even say superlative job of retaining the essence of a Cotton game. A series that I think is worth remembering has never really been considered the pinnacle of shmup refinement, but one that's always offered a ton of cute, charming, cheerful fun, while still providing a solid shooting experience. And that is exactly what Success have served up here, with the added bonus of more content than you could shake a very large magic broomstick at. And capturing that essence, I think, may have been the biggest challenge of all, and certainly the thing most likely to go wrong when reviving a series after 20 years. But it's been perfectly done here, marrying faithfulness to the original with a whole host of new features and mechanical and visual variety that mean not only does Cotton Rock and Roll measure up to its predecessors, it exceeds quite a few of them, and it wouldn't even surprise me to see some people deciding this may be their new favourite Cotton game full stop. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10, and it's fantastic to see such an iconic series return in such a triumphant manner. As of this review, the game is only available in Japan, but it is confirmed for a Western release under the Cotton Fantasy moniker, and I hope it's going to prove a real hit. Let us know your thoughts if and when you play it, and thank you as ever for watching. See you next time. Cheers.